we start our pre-trip inspection, we want to start at the front of our truck. We want to make sure our truck's not leaning to the left or to the right. We want to check our running lights at the top, make sure they're not cracked or damaged, they're the proper color. We're going to come down and check our headlights, turn signals in 4 ways, making sure none of them are cracked or damaged and they're proper color. We're going to check our passenger side also, make sure it's not cracked or damaged, they're proper color. We're also going to look up underneath the truck, make sure we don't see any obvious leaks from oil or anything coming out from underneath the truck. And we're going to go ahead and raise our hood up. First thing we want to check is the windshield. We're checking to make sure it's not cracked or damaged or clean. It's clean. We're going to check this windshield wiper to make sure it's got the proper tension to it and it's not dry rotted. We're going to check our washer fluid level here, make sure it's filled to the proper level in here. We're going to check our exhaust. This dark part starts about right here. All of this is intake from here back. This is your exhaust system where it changes colors. I'm checking it for any kind of soot or carbon where it's been leaking at any point in time. I'm going to check my radiator. I'm checking to make sure it's not cracked or damaged or leaking. I'm going to check my fan blades in here, make sure they're all present, none of them are cracked. I'm going to check my alternator down here. I'm looking to make sure it's properly mounted, the wires aren't frayed. And I'm going to check my belt, make sure I don't have no more than 3/4 inch play on my belts. Check my radiator hose, make sure I don't see any leaks around my hoses and they're not dry rotted. Then we're going to go to the driver's side. We want to take an overall appearance. Just take an overall look at your truck. Make sure you don't see anything obvious just right off the bat. Then I like to start at my eye level and start working my way down and looking for the parts that I need to check. I want to check my coolant level here. I want to make sure it's filled to the proper level. The hoses aren't leaking. They're not dry rotted. I'm going to check my oil right here. This is my oil stick. Pull this out, check it, make sure it's between the add and fill level. If it's not, then this is where I put my oil in. I'm going to check my power steering reservoir, make sure it's not leaking and cracked or damaged. It's filled to a proper level. Checking my hoses coming out to it. One hose runs to your gearbox, one hose runs to your pump, which is the pump to the power steering pump is right back underneath this frame right here. Also, your air compressor is underneath here too. And they're both are gear driven. We're going to check our water pump. Always look for the bottom line out of your radiator that always runs to your water pump. This hose here runs into here. That's my water pump. And this water pump on this truck is actually belt driven. Then we're going to go into our steering system. This is our steering column. We're going to check to make sure it doesn't have more than a couple of inches of play in it. That runs into our gearbox. We're looking to make sure it's properly mounted. It's not leaking, not cracked. My hoses are not leaking or cracked going into it. Coming off of our gearbox here is our pitman arm. This is the whole thing here. It's called a pitman arm. I'm looking to make sure it's not cracked or damaged. This here is called my drag link. It hooks between my pitman arm and my steer knuckle. I'm checking all these to make sure I've got proper connection to them. These are called castle nuts and Carter keys. We want to make sure that those are present in both ends. We're going to check our suspension system. This is our shocks. This is our shocks right here. They run down, hook onto our leaf springs, leaf spring mounts. These are our U-bolts. We want to make sure these U-bolts are tight, secure, where it don't look like they've been moving at any point in time. These are my leaf springs. I'm looking for any kind of cracks or damage or welds where they've been fixed. They run up to my spring mount. I'm making sure all my bolts are secure. They're properly mounted to my frame. Then I'm going to check my frame as much as I can see of it all the way back to the back of the tractor. I'm looking for any kind of cracks or damage to my frame. And coming out of my frame is my air line. This is my ABS wire. This is the air line that runs into my brake chamber, which is the chamber here. This is called a C-clamp that holds these two together. Coming out of my brake chamber, and all this, I'm checking all this, make sure I don't have any cracks or damage or leaks. Make sure this is properly mounted, my bolts are tight. I'm gonna check my push rod here. I'm gonna make sure that it's not bent or damaged. It comes out, hooks onto my slack adjuster. This whole thing here is called a slack adjuster. When I look down in here, I want that slack adjuster to be at least 90%, no more than 90% straight up and down. You can see how this one's leaning back toward the brake canister. That means my brakes are good and my slack adjuster is okay. Make sure my pins are secure. Got my Carter keys in there. That runs out into my brake pads. These are my brake pads. I got to have at least 1/4 of an inch of brake pad. These are my brake drums. I'm looking for any kind of oil or debris or cracks or damage to my brake drum. And I'm going to check my tire. This is a steer tire. This has to have at least 4 30-seconds of tread on it. It has to match the other side in size and in tread. It cannot be a re-grooved tire. It cannot be a retreaded tire. It has to be what they call a virgin tire. I'm going to check the outsides of my tire. I'm looking for any kind of bulges or cracks or dry rots. I'm going to check my rim. I'm looking for cracks or damage to my rim. I'm going to check my valve stem. This is where I check my air and add air if I need to. And I'm also going to make sure I've got a dust cover on this thing right here. These are all my lug nuts. I'm going to make sure they're all present. I'm looking for any kind of rust or metal shavings or anything that's where it looks like they've been loose at any point in time. This is called a hub oil seal. I can take that rubber gasket off there and actually add oil if I need to and check the oil in it. I'm going to move to the side of my tractor. I'm going to check this mirror bracket, make sure it's secured, properly mounted. I'm checking my marker light here. This is a do-it-all light. It's a turn signal 4-way marker light. It's not cracked, it's not damaged, and it's the proper color. I'm going to check my steps, make sure that they're secure. And here's my battery box. These are maintenance-free batteries. If they weren't, then I would have to check the water levels on these batteries. This is my DEF fuel. Make sure my cap's secure on that. I want to check my door handle. Make sure it opens and closes like it's supposed to. I'm going to check this rubber gasket around my door. Make sure it's all the way around my door. None of it's missing or damaged. I'm going to check my door hinges in here. Make sure they're not cracked or damaged. Make sure all the bolts and everything is secure. I'm going to check my 3-point handle here. Make sure it's secure. This is my fuel tank. See one of your saddle straps in here. And what I'm looking for is to make sure these saddle straps haven't been moving at any point in time or loose. This is my fuel cap. I want to take it off actually and look inside there and make sure that O-ring is present and it's not dry rotted or cracked. I'm going to take an overall look at the side of my tractor, make sure I don't see any major damage or any damage to my tractor. Then I can also see the rest of my fuel tank from back here. I can see my other strap in here. Make sure it doesn't look like it's been moving at any point in time. I also want to check these air lines coming out of my tractor into my protection valve. Make sure they're not cracked, they're not damaged. Then the line, this is my protection valve. Then these run into my glad hand lines and my electrical lines. I'm going to check this handle back here, make sure it's secure. I'm going to check the overall appearance of my tractor on the back, make sure I don't see any damage. And I'm going to move back in here a little bit. I want to check my drive shaft. I'm going to make sure I don't have any damage to my drive shaft. It's not bent. Also, this is my exhaust. I want to check my exhaust to make sure I don't have any soot or carbon where it's been leaking at any point in time. I want to check these glad hand lines and my electrical lines. I want to make sure that they're not been Haven't been rubbed on the catwalk at any point in time. They're not cracked or damaged. I want to check my catwalk, make sure it's secure, and my steps are secure. I'm also going to check my air lines coming out of my trailer up to my glad hands. I'm checking for all of them to make sure they're not cracked or damaged or leaking. These are actually my glad hand lines. These connect my tractor to my trailer. These will come off. There's an O-ring in between here that you want to check. Make sure it's not dry rotted or cracked. Make sure your electrical line is secure into your trailer.